All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we are doing a deep dive, very fascinating one, I think, into the future of Intel. And oh boy, this is going to be interesting because we're looking at a Fortune magazine opinion piece called Intel's Future Rebuild, Don't Break Apart. And the interesting thing is, the author is a former Intel CEO.
Yeah, and he's got some, shall we say, strong opinions about what the board should be doing. In fact, he pretty much thinks they should all be fired.
Well, we are definitely going to get to that. But first, let's set the stage a bit. So, the big debate here is, should Intel be split up into two separate companies? Some former board members, they're arguing for this split, right? Design and manufacturing, they say, should be separate entities.
Right, and their thinking is that this move, separating those two, would actually attract more of the independent chip designers out there because, these designers, they look at Intel and they see a competitor right now, so they are, understandably, a little hesitant to work with them.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like, if you're I don't know, small bakery or something, and you've got this amazing recipe for a cake. You wouldn't want to share that recipe with a huge company that also makes cakes.
Exactly. You'd be worried they'd just, steal your ideas or prioritize their own version of the cake, right?
Exactly. So it's a trust thing. But this former CEO who wrote the article we're looking at today, he thinks breaking up the company is totally the wrong move. He's advocating for staying unified and focusing on, he calls it, winning through superior technology.
Exactly. He's basically saying, hey, look, Intel's made some big technological advancements recently, and that puts them in a very strong position to compete, regardless of how the company is structured. He specifically points to their 2-nanometer technology, which is now on par with TSMC. They're the industry leader. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, Intel is actually ahead of the curve in a couple of key areas.
Oh, okay. So what are those areas? I'm all ears.
So one of them is something called high NA EUV lithography. Now that's a mouthful, but basically think of it like, the most advanced printing press for making these tiny chips. And Intel, they're already processing thousands of wafers using this technology. It's essential for making chips smaller, faster, more energy efficient.
Wow. So like imagine our phones. They could last for days on a single charge.
Yeah, exactly. No more battery anxiety.
That's incredible. Okay, what's the other area where Intel is ahead?
So this one's called backside power delivery, and it's all about how electricity flows through the chip. Think of it like, adding an extra lane to a highway. You can move more cars faster without creating a traffic jam.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And this is super important for the chips of the future because they need to be able to handle all this crazy complex stuff, like artificial intelligence or machine learning.
Right, so basically this former CEO is saying, we have the tech, we just need to leverage it. But he's also realistic. I mean, he acknowledges that Intel's had some stumbles in the past, especially in that foundry business, which is about manufacturing chips for other companies.
Oh, absolutely. He's upfront about that. He says their past failures, they were mainly because they didn't have the most advanced technology at the time, which, actually supports his argument that the best technology wins. He's saying they've learned from their mistakes and they're back in the game.
All right, so that's interesting, but what else does he think Intel needs to do to succeed besides just, developing cool technology? Does he have any thoughts on how the government could help? Or
He does. He definitely does. He suggests that, maybe the government could play a more active role in supporting the U.S. semiconductor industry. Things like encouraging U.S. firms to use Intel's foundry, maybe even investing directly in Intel. He brings up economic reasons, even national security concerns.
Oh, that's an interesting angle. We hear a lot about the importance of semiconductors for national security, but we don't always dig into the specifics.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Semiconductors are essential for so many things, from military equipment and communication systems to critical infrastructure like, our power grids and financial networks. I mean, if we're relying too heavily on foreign chip manufacturers, well, that could become a big risk to national security down the line.
That's a good point. It's kind of like that saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yeah.
So having a strong homegrown supply of chips would make the U.S. less vulnerable if there were any disruptions in the global supply chain.
For sure. And it seems like, at least to me, this former CEO really believes that leadership is the most crucial factor for Intel right now, even more than government help. And he does not seem very impressed with the current leadership team.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was pretty critical of the current leadership, wasn't he?
Yeah, he calls them a CFO and a product manager. He says they just don't have that deep understanding of the semiconductor industry that's needed.
So he's saying, we need someone at the top who really, really gets it, someone who's been there, done that.
Yeah, and he has a very specific person in mind. Someone who's already proven they can lead Intel to big technological wins.
Okay, now you have to tell me. Who is it? Don't leave us hanging.
Okay, so are you ready for this?
I think so.
He says the Intel board should be fired for their past mistakes, and they should rehire former CEO Pat Gelsinger.
Oh, wow. I did not see that coming. So this is the same guy who, spearheaded all those recent breakthroughs we were just talking about, right? This former CEO is basically saying, let's bring back the guy who knows how to win.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a very bold suggestion.
It is. It really is. And it shows you just how deeply he cares about Intel, how frustrated he is with the way things are going.
Definitely, you can feel his passion and commitment to Intel.
Yeah. It's like watching someone try to help a friend who's going through a rough patch. This is already so fascinating, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we have. It's going to be a good one.
It's kind of crazy to think that something so tiny, like a semiconductor, can have such a huge impact on the world. I mean, most people probably don't even know what they look like, but they are literally running our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. We really do take them for granted, but without them, our modern world would just, I don't know, stop working, I guess. And, this brings us back to what we're talking about with Intel, right? It's not just some theoretical debate about business strategy. It's about real-world consequences. I mean, these decisions could affect everything from how much your next phone costs to, the security of the country.
Okay, so let's say, just for argument's sake, that Intel decides to follow this former CEO's advice. They bring back Pat Gelsinger, they go all in on becoming the tech leader. That sounds great, but isn't it kind of risky to put all your eggs in one basket like that? What if, I don't know, another company comes out of nowhere with even better technology? Or what if there's some big change that no one sees coming?
Well, I mean, yeah, that is a risk, right? I mean, no one can predict the future, and technology changes so fast. There's always a chance that someone will come up with something totally new, something disruptive that changes everything.
So even with amazing technology, there's no guarantee of success. They still need to be smart, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Technology is super important, but it's not everything. You need a good strategy. You need to be able to deal with all kinds of global challenges, manage your supply chain well, and yeah, like you said, strong leadership is critical.
Speaking of leadership, this suggestion to fire the entire board and bring back this one specific guy, that's pretty radical. What makes this former CEO so sure that this is the answer?
Well, he's not just some random guy giving his opinion, right? He was the CEO of Intel, so he knows how hard that job is. And he knows how complicated this industry is. From his point of view, the current board has messed up, and he thinks Pat Gelsinger is the only one who can fix it.
So it's not just some off-the-cuff idea. He's really thought this through. It's based on his own experience and, I guess, his judgment of how things are right now.
Exactly. He's not just throwing ideas around. He's saying, look, I've been there. This is what needs to happen.
Yeah, but can you imagine being on that board? Oh, hey, remember that CEO we got rid of? Yeah, we want him back now.
Yep.
I don't think that would go over very well.
Yeah, probably not. But, at the end of the day, this is just one guy's opinion. It's important to remember that. There are a lot of people involved, and everyone's going to have different ideas about what's best for Intel.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the drama, but it is a complicated issue with no easy solutions.
Exactly. There's no clear right or wrong answer here. There are strong arguments on both sides.
So let's take a step back for a second. We have these former board members who want to break up the company, and we have this former CEO who wants to keep it together. For you, what's the most important thing we've learned from this debate?
I think the biggest takeaway is that what happens to Intel is going to have a big impact on the future of technology in general. The decisions they make, they're going to affect the whole industry and all of us, whether we realize it or not.
It's like we're looking at this tiny little chip, and as we zoom out, we realize it's connected to everything.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it like that.
So it's not just about, the latest gadgets. It's about the way we live our lives now and how that's going to change in the future.
Absolutely. And I think what makes this article so interesting is that you can really feel this former CEO's passion. It's not just about business for him. He cares about Intel. It's personal.
It's like he's saying, hey, don't give up on Intel. We can still be great.
Yeah. And, the big question is, how do they do that? And a big part of that is leadership.
Right. He thinks they need to bring back Pat Gelsinger. But is that really the answer? What kind of leader does Intel need?
That's the million-dollar question. It's a really tough job. They need someone who understands all the technical stuff, of course, but also someone who's a visionary, a good strategist, someone who can deal with all the political and economic stuff, too.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask of one person. But the stakes are high. They can't afford to mess this up. And speaking of high stakes, there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's the government. This former CEO, he mentioned something called the CHIPS Act, and he hinted that the Biden administration is handling it differently than the Trump administration. Can you explain what that is and why it matters in this whole Intel discussion?
Yeah, so the CHIPS Act, it stands for Creating Helpful Incentives to Produce Semiconductors. It's basically a law that's supposed to help boost semiconductor manufacturing here in the U.S. The idea is to make the U.S. less dependent on foreign companies for these really important chips.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does it relate to Intel specifically?
Well, the CHIPS Act could give Intel and other companies like them a lot of money to expand their manufacturing here in the U.S. It could also help fund research and development, which could lead to even better technology down the road.
So it sounds like it could be a big help to Intel, give them the resources they need to compete globally.
Mhm.
But you said there were differences in how the Biden and Trump administrations approached this, right? What were those differences and how could they affect Intel?
Yeah, so the Trump administration was really pushing for the CHIPS Act. They saw it as a way to, counter China's influence in the tech world. It was about national security and also about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America.
So it was a made in America kind of approach.
Exactly. Now, the Biden administration, they agree that it's important to have a strong semiconductor industry here, but they are more focused on working with allies, other countries. They want to build a global supply chain that's more reliable. They're also really focused on investing in research and development.
So it's less about us versus them and more about working together to make the whole inventory stronger, both here and around the world.
Right. And that could actually be good for Intel because they are trying to grow their foundry business, which means selling their manufacturing services to companies all over the world.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about making things in America. It's about being part of a global network.
Exactly.
This is getting really interesting, but we could probably talk about the CHIPS Act for a whole hour.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's a lot to it.
I think we should do a whole deep dive on that next time. What do you think?
I'm in. I think people would find it really interesting.
All right, so before we wrap up this deep dive on Intel, let's just recap what we've learned today.
Well, the main takeaway is that Intel is at a crossroads. They've made a lot of progress in technology, but they have a lot of tough decisions to make. What they do next is going to determine whether they become a leader again or just kind of fade away.
And their decisions are going to affect all of us, even if we don't realize it. It's about the technology we use, the jobs we have, even the security of the country.
It's a reminder that even something as small as a semiconductor can have a huge impact on our lives.
It really can.
Mhm.
So what do you think our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is that the future of technology, it's not set in stone. It's something that we are all shaping through the choices we make. And the more we understand about these issues, the better choices we can make.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's funny, we started talking about Intel, one company, but now it feels like we're talking about, well, everything. Like the whole tech world and how it's all connected.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And this article, it's about Intel, but it shows how all these different things affect each other. The decisions that companies make, new technologies, government policies, it all has an impact on, well, everyone, I guess.
Right, and someone listening might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but how does this affect me?
Yeah.
Like, why should I care about Intel or what happens to the semiconductor industry?
Think about it. Your smartphone, your computer, even your car, they all use semiconductors. And Intel is a huge part of that world. What they do affects how fast technology advances, how much things cost, even national security, like we talked about.
Right, it's not just about, like, having the latest gadgets. It's about how we live our lives. And this whole debate about breaking up Intel, it's not just some business thing. It could really change things for all of us.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this article is you can tell that this former CEO really cares about Intel. It's not just, numbers and profits for him. It's personal.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, hey, Intel can still be great. We just need to do the right things.
Exactly. And as we've been talking about, it's not easy. There are no simple answers. Some people think breaking up the company is the solution, but this CEO, he makes a really good argument for why that might be a bad idea. He thinks Intel needs to focus on technology and leadership, get back to what made them successful in the first place.
And that brings us back to that big question. Who should be the next CEO of Intel? Should they bring back Pat Gelsinger, like he suggested? It's a huge decision. It's like they're trying to cast the lead role in a movie, but the movie is like the future of technology.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They need someone who understands the technology, but also someone who can think strategically, someone who's a leader, and someone who can deal with all the global stuff, the politics, the economics. It's a lot.
It really is. But
Yeah.
maybe someone listening right now is that person. You never know.
You're right. You never know where the next great leader will come from.
So, to wrap things up, I think the big takeaway here is that the future of technology, it's not set in stone. It's something that we are all creating together. And by learning about these issues, by talking about them, we can all help shape that future.
Yeah, I completely agree. The more we know, the better decisions we can make, both as individuals and as a society.
Well said. That's it for this deep dive into the future of Intel. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget to tune in next time when we'll be doing a deep dive into the Sheech IPS Act. We're going to talk about how the government is trying to support the semiconductor industry and what that means for all of us.
It's going to be a good one. See you next time.